Okay. Hello, everyone. So I'm Thibault François. I'm working at Odoo as a technical consultant. So I work with the client and make projects that need customization, and it could be sometimes big project where we have to take the data from the previous system and put them into Odoo. So this presentation will be about that, moving legacy data into Odoo using the import feature. Doesn't mean using the import wizard in the interface, but using the import feature of the framework. And especially how you should automate your process. So I will have a short introduction. Then a key concept to understand the whole process are the external ID. So I will explain in detail what is it. Then basically it's a three-step process. First you extract the data, then you transform your data, and finally you load your data into Odoo. And I'll start with a real-life example, and finally a conclusion. Okay. So let's start with a small story. You may probably know all about that story. You have deployed Odoo for a customer. All the custom module is deployed, tested, everything's fine, your configuration is done, you're ready to go in production. You feel confident, everything is going to be well, but wait, there is something missing. The data. So you are kind of new in the business, so you feel confident, say, okay, let's just extract the data from the previous system. There is a nice extract tool, so you don't have problem for that. Then you open your favorite spreadsheet editor. You transform the extract data into a CSV that Odoo can understand. So you spend a lot of time with VLOOKUP, do manual transformation. And finally, you load the data with the import wizard. Of course, there's too much data, so you get timeout, you split your file, you import again, and you're happy. What went wrong? Well, it took you 5 days. Well, it's just maybe a bit exaggerated, but it depends on how much data you have to load. So the production launch needs to be delayed. The data have changed since the first time you extract them, so you have to start over again, whole process. And after testing, also, you manage to find that some information is missing, or they are at the wrong place, because you did that once, so you had error. And of course, so you start the process again. So let's make that story never happen again. I'll make a short. People is coming or not? No, okay. Please have a seat. Okay, so importing legacy data, it's a complex process. It's not something that you can do 2 days before the production. So it's a process, it's hard to avoid. Usually your customers have data they want to put into Odoo. And there is a lot of back and forward most of the time. So it should be started as soon as possible. As soon as you know what module of Odoo you want to use, what kind of customization you will make to Odoo, you will probably know what kind of data you need to extract and transform. So at that point, at least start to analyze. And it should be automated as possible, because the process, you probably will run it more than once. And you don't want to lose your time to make the same manual action all the time. Okay? And it's an iterative process. So you get only the error at the loading, but actually the error should be fixed at the extraction step or the transformation step. So you start from the beginning, so automate it. And of course, data will evolve until the final migration. If you have let's say a 6-month project, if you start after 1 month extracting the data, 6 months later, you don't have the same data. You have more data probably. They have been updated, so you need to import those data, not the first one you extract 6 months ago. So so the error, as already said, will be fine at the loading process, but sometimes they need to be fixed at the extraction step. And you should always perform a final dry run of your import on a test database before importing into production, because you can mess up everything with your import if something goes wrong, so make sure that it's going well on the test database. So for that, we will need some automation. So what are the benefits of the automation of the process? Well, of course, you save time when you start the process again and again. you remove the risk of human error, because if you have a step with many things to do to extract the data, transform your data, and then import them, if you're a human, you can make some mistakes. It's happened. And if you make mistakes for production, things can go nasty. It allows you to focus on the next problem. So if everything is automated, then you find a problem at loading. OK, you say, I have to change my automation process to fix that problem. But the rest is already fixed. So it's great because you build your knowledge. You will import once, you get error, you change your automation. You don't have to worry about this error anymore. You go to the next step. So it's a 3-step process. As I said, there is extraction from the old system, the transformation, and the loading. We will see what to do at each step. Yeah, for this process, I will consider that you use the import feature of Odoo, not script that do create and write or script that do SQL directly. It's a really nice feature of Odoo, and I will show you how the step should be done if we use this feature. Regardless the tool that you want to use, I mean, use your favorite ETL if you have one. Use your own tools or your own script if you have some. I will show you mine, but you are not, it's not an obligation to use it. OK, so first, one key concept before going further. It's the external ID, also known as XML ID. What is it? Well, it's a unique identifier for a record across the whole database. So it's not like an ID in database where it's unique per table. Here it's unique across all tables. That's important. It's a record, actually, in a table called year model data. That record is a mapping between a module and a value and a name, and a model and its ID. So basically, you will give a module and a name, and you get a table and an ID in Odoo. It's written like this. So module.name. Wow. The dot is not allowed in module or in name. That's the only restriction. It can be as long as you want. You can make it as you want. OK? So you see here it's a screenshot of the table. It's in technical external identifier. So you have the complete name, the module and the external identifier, and here the model name and the record ID. OK? Why you need those ID? Well, if you use the import, it can be defined by human. So it's not something Postgres will give you when you create the record. It can be defined prior to the import by a human. So it's really important. It's used as reference in relational fields. So if you have a many-to-one and you want to point to say, OK, I will import link to this other record, you can use it external identifier. So this means you can define all your ID before importing anything. You don't need to read the target database to generate your ID. That saves a lot of time. And if you import a record and it has an external ID, Odoo will recognize that it should update the record instead of creating a new one. So it means if you import 2 times the same file, instead of duplicate all your data, you will just update your data. OK? It's therefore a key concept at each step. OK, how to define a proper external ID? Create at the import. So you need a colon ID in all your CSV that you will import. Choose a module value per file. So the module value can be seen as the source. So using, for example, the name of the table in the old system, it's a good practice. Not an existing module name. So if you use sales, base, stock, it's a really, really bad idea because you will lose your data. Why? When Odoo upgrades a module, it will check the XML ID available in the module and in the database. If in the database there is some ID that are not in the module, they will be deleted. So if you import something that is not linked to a module that exists and you use that module name, they will be deleted when you upgrade the module. So don't use an existing module. OK? build a name based on the variable field in your extraction, because you have to build those ID based on the data available in your extract. Okay? Make sure they are unique. If they are not unique, what happened? Then you will update an existing data. If you want to record, you will end up with only one if they are not unique. Okay? Here is some example. So my practice is to use the client name, the table name, and then here something unique, a mail. Okay, it's a good unique field. I replace the dot with an underscore. Here, it's a category for the tag. I use the name. Why? In some case, like tag, title, small object, actually the name, if it is the same name, it's probably you want to be the same record. So in that case, it's not unique, but it's fine because you will point out to the same record. So as I said, okay. And yeah, don't use non-deterministic value like row number, the current time, because what you want is a given record in the old system should always give you the same external ID. Because if you do a new extract and the data didn't change, you want to keep updating your data and not create a new record. Okay, so the extraction. Well, the goal of the extraction is to get something that you can transform into something Odoo will understand. Working with CSV, so if you extract some and put it in CSV is good because you can visualize your data at each step. You can have the same record in different files. So some information in one file, some other, it's fine. As soon as you can build an external ID, you will just add your information in the same record. You can also have one file that contains many data. It's fine. You just need to split your file and at transformation step. Make sure that you have all the needed information to build your external ID. Okay, this is very important. So you should start your process as soon as possible, and you should know the final result as soon as possible. So analyze what you are going to export to import before rushing into, okay, I get my file and let's try something. No, analyze first. Identify all the final objects you want to import. Identify the information then you need to extract. Actually, you want the final result, so you know what you need to extract. And make a high-level mapping between your field. You don't need to go into each detail because it will be the role of the transform process, but have already an idea of this field is going to be there. Okay? And of course, define how you are going to build your unique ID. This will, if you're not responsible of the extraction process, it's happened a lot, you will avoid a lot of ping pong with the one who is responsible for the extraction. Say, okay, I need this field more, I need this field. And each time you exchange information, you may lose 1 day or 2 days, or even more. Okay, tool for extraction. Well, since each system source is different, I cannot advise you a tool. Most of the time, you will have a SQL database, so you can make SQL query. I'm sure there is good tool that do that. Sometimes there is web services, and your client is also a good tool to extract the data. Just ask him, get me that. It's usually what I do. And indeed, if someone else takes care of the extraction, agree with him on what you want to extract. But don't be too picky. I mean, if there is some typo, some problem, for example, in the country, they are spelled in a different way than in Odoo, you can fix that at transformation step. Don't waste time making them fix that data. Okay, the transformation. That's probably the most complex step because it's where you actually transform your data into something Odoo can import. Okay? You need to make sure that all your data will be linked together in Odoo, the external ID again. You need to make sure that the format will be something that Odoo will accept. And you have the opportunity to fix few problems in the data, like typo, like merging some data together, remove duplicates. But to know how to transform, you need to know what Odoo expect. And also, I will show you a tool of mine that I do for transformation CSV into another CSV. OK, so what does Odoo expect? it doesn't expect an ID column, but if you don't have one, it will always create a new record. Then it's an UTF-8 encoded CSV per model. Okay. For the header, use the technical name. You could use the display name, but then it depends on the lang, and it can be messy, so it's safer to use the technical name. In debug mode, you can see the technical name of each field. So the colon ID. And for many-to-one and many-to-many, you need to add a /ID after the name to tell Odoo, OK, use the external ID to link that record. And of course, each type of field has its own format. We are going to see that. So which format for which field? Well, the Boolean, it's safe to say 1 or 0. It works all the time. True or false should work too, but be careful maybe with the capital letter or not. So I use always 1 and 0. The float, it depends on the lang, but since you are going to import with RPC call, most of the time you don't set up lang in your context. Then use just decimal separator dot. For the date, the same again, it depends on the the language. But the default one is ISO format, and it's perfectly fine. The binary, it should be encoded in base 64 into the cell of the CSV. So when you have binary in your CSV, it's harder to visualize. So usually what I do, I'm happy with all the field, then I'm checking it's loading, and then I'm adding the binary file. Many-to-one. So there is actually three ways to link a record, a many-to-one. You can use the name, but as soon as the name is not unique anymore, it won't work. You can use the /ID to use the external ID, what I really advise you to do. And finally, you can use the database ID with .id. But the point is here, you didn't import yet your data. You are just transforming them. You don't know the ID yet, so it's impossible to use this information. Okay? For many-to-many, it's the same, but you will just separate by comma the list of external ID or the name in the same cell. OK, so my framework, it's called Odoo CSV tool. It's available on PyPy, so you can you can install it like that with pip. The usage, OK. That's good. First, you import an object called processor. It will process your CSV. You instantiate it with the original file you want to transform. Then you define mapping. You can have more than one mapping. Each mapping will generate an output file. But one file, as I said, can generate more than one output file. And then, so I will see later how to define the mapping. Then you process your mapping. You say, OK, I want the output to be in that file. And here it's the parameter that will be given to the script that will import the data into Odoo. OK, and finally, you tell the processor file to save the file on the disk and actually accessory generate a shell script with all the commands to import the file into Odoo. So it's integrated with my Odoo tool that import CSV into Odoo. OK, so how to define the mapping? Well, it's just a Python dictionary. The key is the destination field, so don't forget the /ID if it's a many-to-one. The value is a function that will take a record, which is just a dictionary with the key as a column. The key is the column of the original file, and the value is the value of that column in the original file for the given line. So the processor will process each line one by one with the mapping. Okay? So it is a simple mapping. It's a method. I get the record, and I return the company name. The company name is the name of my column in the original file, and it will end up in the name in my final file. Of course, you don't have to define all your mapping manually like that. I have a set of generic mapper. So there are functions that return function, and the parameter is stored in the closure. So it seems scary, but it's quite easy to use. There's one that returns always the same value, one that returns the value of that specific column, one that concatenates some column. There's one that do a mapping. This one is super useful to fix data because it will take the value of the original file and then apply a mapping on it. So if you have Belgique instead of Belgium, you can say, okay, each time I see Belgique, I'll transform it into Belgium, for example. There is one for numeric value, one for binary, one for bool. I won't go into detail, but it's available on GitHub anyway. And this is how you can define that kind of generic mapper. So this one is just the one that gives you the value of the column. So it's a function that returns another function. You can write a skipping exception to say, if some condition, I won't have that line in my final field. OK, so back to the transformation, the relational field. It's, of course, the bigger pain point of the transformation. For many-to-one, you have to find a way to generate an XML ID that match the record that you already generate the ID in the other file. So for example, if you have a sell order, and on your sell order you want to, you have the partner ID, then you need, with the sell order file, find a way to generate the ID of the partner. If you export from SQL, usually it's easy because you have the ID in the old system, you can use it as external ID. And in my framework, there is a mapper for that. It's many-to-one. Basically, it uses a prefix, which is a constant, and be concatenated with the value of a specific field. For one-to-many, well, it's easy. Don't import one-to-many. There is always a many-to-one to import to set the value. For example, on the sell order, import in a file the sell order, and in the second file, the sell order line. You can do that because it's a migration of data, and you can make sure that all your data is imported. If you are doing a web service, a connector, don't do that, because you will end up with empty sell order if something fails. But in this case, you can check that everything is fine. It's not a real-time process. So for the many-to-many, you can have the value in one column, separated by comma already, or you can have different columns that will end up in the same many-to-many. It happens. In that case, if you have in the same value, split your value, generate the proper XML ID, and then put them again together in the cell. There is a mapper to help you do that, the prefix always, and then you can specify as much field as you want that will be put together. And of course, if it's the field, it's already many value, it will split the value first. OK, how it's happened sometime. For example, for partner title, for tag, you don't have a specific file for the tag. You just have a big file with all the client, and you have a column for the tag. But you don't have another file to import the tag first. In that case, you need to output two files, one for the tag and then one for your client. Okay. In case of many-to-many, sometimes one cell will generate many records in your output file for the category. In that case, I have a special way to process the data. Here, the mapper is not returning anymore a value. It's returning a list of value. So if both returning the same number of value, it will generate the same number of line. And there is a specific parameter here to tell, OK, my mapping is not returning only value. It's returning a list of value. So each time you see a list of value, create many lines. OK, this one, it's a nightmare. You probably face it in your life. If you want to import attachment, mail message, followers, there is even more. They are linked to another data. But since it's not a data from a specific model, it's not a many-to-one. There is actually two fields, REST model and REST ID. One is an int, another one is a char. The int, if you put an XML ID in it, it won't be transformed into a database ID. It will just raise you an error. So basically, for those, you are screwed. Because you need first to import your partner, and then read the target database to get the ID generated by Postgres and put it in your import file. It takes a lot of time. If you process line by line, it can take ages. So I make a module. It's available on GitHub. It's free. It's called import REST ID. The link is here. What it does, it creates a new field, REST external ID, on all those objects. Actually, it's a mix-in, so you can even make your own object. And this field is a computed field. If you set the value of an external ID, it will set the value of REST ID and REST model. If you read it, you will get the external ID of the value pointing by REST ID and REST model. So it's super useful, because you don't need to read the target database anymore. OK. So finally, to transformation, well, there is no magic recipe, because transformation depends on what you get to extract at the extraction step. Find a good way to link data and to generate XML ID is not always easy. Sometimes well, I had an example where the journal, the account move actually was not a one-to-one mapping in the old system. So we had to find a way to group the journal item together to generate an account move. And then it was really complicated to find an ID, because in the old system there was no ID since you were doing a group by. So we had to find a couple of fields that were unique in a way we wanted. Keep using your favorite tool. And more you are doing with them, more you get efficient with it, and more you know how to solve problems that you already see in the past. So use your tool. But if you don't have, you can check mine. So the loading part. It's the easiest, I'd say. You just need to put your transform data into Odoo. But you'll get all the error at that step. You can transform anything, everything you want. The only moment you see the error is when you really import them into Odoo. So you will have to fix them, but most of the time in your transformation, not at loading. The extraction also, it's even more painful because you have to start further in this process. Of course, at that step of loading, you want to log all the error, and you want to know which are the bad line, so the line that generate error. Sometimes it's something you cannot fix, and it has to be fixed in the old system and extract again. And you want to be able, because sometimes it takes long to import, you want to be able to start, to stop, and to resume your, your process where you stopped it last time. And of course, you want it to be as fast as possible. See, it's not fun to look at a screen that is loading all the time. So what you should use, it's not the wizard for Odoo, but it's the RPC load method. It has exactly the same behavior as the import wizard, but it's the only way to use the magic of external ID. If you are using create and write, you need database ID all the time. So it's built on the top of the ORM. So it means it will trigger default value, computed field, everything that was all the logic embedded in the create or in the write. You can work in batch. So you have to create a record one by one. With load, you can load 400 records in one call. So you save time, you save a call to your server. And it can be parallelized. So it means you can send many batches at the same time to the server. That's the way to speed up the thing. And of course, it decides to create an updated record according it's already existing in the database or not. OK, so I've made a tool already. It's also available on PyPy. It's the same library as the transform one. I made a presentation last year on why is it good, how is it designed, all the parameters you can give. So I will just summary it here. So you have the link for the last year presentation and the link on GitHub. The key feature, it splits huge file into batch and parallelize in RPC. So you can say, split my file of, I don't know, 20,000 partner into batch of 200 and load it 4x4 requests at the same time. Of course, your server needs to be sized to be efficient with 4 requests at the same time. Or it could be more. It could be 9 or 10. Be careful if you use this tool on a system that is already used by a user. Don't use all the worker, otherwise user won't be able to to do anything. it reports the error, the wrong line, and you get a report in a separate file, so you can really send to your client, okay, this line were wrong, please fix this column. It's super useful. It imports the rest, so it's not like the wizard import, where you import 100,000 lines, and if one line fails, you have nothing in your database. So then, if everything is imported, you can only focus on re-importing what was missing. And something really important that you cannot do with the import wizard is specify a context. I will show you later why it's super important. OK, how you use it? Well, it's in the path if you import with PyPy, so you just call the Python file. You need to give a connection file. Then you say, OK, it's this file to import, this model, and you specify how many workers, so how many threads at the same time will be sent to the server, and the size of your batch. There is also, it's new this year, a Python API, so you can call it directly from Python. So you could imagine to have everything in one file. So you extract from a web service, you put in the transform, you get a header and a list of data, and you import it directly. But then you have no control, and you don't see the different steps. So I prefer to work with CSV at each step, but you can do as you want. And the connection file, where it's just the information you need to connect to your database. Always use secure connection. Usually use the admin, so you don't have problem with access right. And you should specify the UID. So you will save login call that may end up with concurrent update, because each time you log in with a user, you set up the last connection date. I think it was fixed since version 10, but before that, it's way better to use the UID directly. OK. The order you use to load your data is really important, because, of course, you cannot reference an object that is not yet in the database. So if in your file you have a reference to a partner category, first import the partner category, then the partner. If you have parent ID, well, the order inside the file could matter, but there is another other way to do so. You split in two files, one without the parent ID. You import that one first, and then the second file with the parent ID. Since you have XML ID, you will update the data and set up the parent ID, and it's going to be fine. And of course, always perform a final dry run on a fresh database to make sure your order is correct before the final migration into production. OK, the mighty context. What you can do in the context. First, you can put tracking disable. It means no mail message will be generated at creation, no tracking, anything. It speeds up the process usually. You can force a company. Say, OK, your admin is always in one company, but you want to set up a company property, then just use force company. The system will believe that you are in that company. You can specify the language. It's good to import translation. So import your field twice, once in one language, once another time in a second language. You can change the behavior of the many-to-many import. Yeah, I didn't speak about that. When you import a many-to-many, it replaces the value if the many-to-many has already some value in it. With that, in the context, you say, OK, keep the value, just add mine. It can be super useful. And you can force specific behavior. You can tell Odoo to not check that your account move is balanced, for example. You can tell when you create a product template, don't create my product, because I will take care of it in the next file. OK, loading metadata. I had that question. And unfortunately, it's not possible. So metadata, it's create UID, write UID, create date, and those things. It can be interesting to know when it was actually created in the old system, not because otherwise you will have your metadata all at the same day. But you cannot do that by default. You need to do SQL query, but there is no API to do SQL query directly to Odoo. So I make a small module, also available with the REST ID one, that actually allow you to do that. You just need to be admin and put in the context write metadata. Otherwise, it won't work. OK? And it doesn't work well with write UID and write date, because sometimes you have a second write made for a computed field, but the write information is less important than the creation date. Okay. Okay. So one more trick: speed up the final migration with incremental import. As you know, you can update existing value in your database. So sometimes you can have huge file, millions of account move line, for example, and it takes more than 1 day to just run them, run the load. And you don't want to stop your production for the final import for 1 week. You know, one night, maybe 1 day is acceptable, more it's not acceptable. So how to tackle that? Well, probably most of those data are not used in the system. It's just archive or sleeping data. So you can probably, you can upload pre-all the final migration, all the existing data, and save the date when you do your extract. And when the final migration comes, just extract what has been changed or created since the last time and import only those data. Of course, if someone uses the system between your first upload and your second, you have a problem, because if someone touch in Odoo the data, and then you import those data has been modified in the other system, the value of the other system will be set in Odoo. So it's not to have a running migration and people using it. No, just, OK, 1 month before the migration, final migration, the first use of the system, I put my data there, and then I will just put the diff. OK, good. And yeah, as I said, it's a little short. So I make a small example, but it's taken from a real life. It's also available on GitHub. Yeah. So it was a closed retail store. The hardcore thing with this is the product, because they use a lot of variant. We keep it simple. In the real case, it was more, but for the example here, I keep it simple for extract. So the client gave me a client list with the picture and tag, supplier list, the message that has been exchanged with the supplier, and finally a list of product variant with their attribute and categories. What we want to put into Odoo? Well, the partner, the client, supplier, and the contact, the partner category, the partner title, the chapter message, the product category, the product template, the product variant, the attribute value, the attribute line. So if you know how product variance is architecture, there is a lot of object behind it. So we end up, and the vendor information, on the product. So we end up with 11 objects to import into Odoo. So for 4 or 5, we end up with 11. Transform the client. Well, the challenge was that there is no obvious ID. So unfortunately, name and zip, the concatenation of both, was unique. Other than that, well, we had tag into separate file, create, date, language, country, and I think I don't have salesman. So this was the final result. So I have the order in the file doesn't matter. So my framework doesn't care about the order. So I have the length first. The ID is in the middle here. You can see test client, and this is the prefix, and then the name plus the zip. For the create UID, I use the name of the user, because I knew that there was only 2 users, and I can use their login actually to make the link. So no need to use XML, external ID all the time. If it's, for example, payment term, stuff like, or taxes, most of the time you can manage to link data just with the name. For the country, I use the external ID. So I make a mapping to know, OK, if it's Belgique, I will use BE. If it's FR, I will use FR here. And I have my category. I had only 6 categories, but still I have to import them. This is the mapping. So most of them, it's mapping val. This one is a bit special, because first I concatenate the value, and then I use the many-to-one mapper. There's the map val. For the val, you can post-process. So here, I change the format of my date field. And I have a many-to-many to link my tag. And of course, as already said, another mapping to create my category. OK, so I end up with 3 files to import because I had one for grade and one for category. The supplier, well, here the challenge is that I have the company, I have a contact name, and I have a contact title. So I will end up also with 3 files to import at the end. So I just show you the many-to-one mapping. The rest is pretty straightforward. So first, I have a mapping for my company. Then I use that as parent. I have the title, and then I use the title here. So that here usually is the same field, the same prefix. It's the way you link it together. And the process order is important. So first, I want to import my title, then my company, and then my contact. OK? Supplier message. Supplier message, well, thanks to my module, I can link it to the company with their XML ID. Thanks to the fact that I use here the email as ID for the contact, I can reuse the email to link to the author of the message. Yeah, OK. And the product I want, I don't have time to show you all the complexity, but the complexity from those columns, size, this is the attribute. So each line is a variant, so it means for the template, I need to have to group my line and just choose one as the template. And for a given template, I need to find all the attributes to put in my attribute line value. It generates a lot of files, so 8 files. So the main issue is the column. Thanks to the update many-to-many in the context, I was not obliged to put all together my attribute in my attribute line. So I can have one line to first set the first attribute in my attribute line, then the second line for the second, etc. This only works since version 10. In version 9, you don't have this option. Yeah. So it's available on GitHub, and you can check all the complexity later. So at the end, for the loading, there was 15 files to import. But thanks to my framework, all the bash file was ready. I just have to launch them in a proper order. I need to load them and understand the error. So back to transform, fix the error, and then I'm ready to go. I make a final dry run, and then I'm ready to import a file. In that case, the transformation took less than 1 minute. So it's super short. Once you're automated everything, you just launch your script, and you have to transform all your data. And the loading, well, it takes a bit more time, but it was not a super huge client. So we had maybe 10,000 clients, 10,000 products. It takes a few minutes to go there. So in conclusion, use the tool you want to automate your process, but please load your data with RPC call load. The automation will build up your knowledge. So you only have to worry to the next problem and not have to worry to make sure you repeat all the steps each time. Yeah, it makes it easy to reproduce your step, of course. It saves you time. And it removes the surprise for the final migration. Because you already make a dry run, you know that everything is going well. Well, you always have surprise, but you have less surprise, let's say. And of course, in that process, the external ID are the key. Well, and of course, start as soon as possible. It's a long, iterative process. So start as soon as possible. If you are done before, much earlier than the production, then it's good. It's something else something to not worry about anymore. OK, so right on time. Do you have any question?
Does your tool work with the Latin characters?
It works with UTF-8, so even Chinese and everything, it's working.
So when you could generate the ID?
It's UTF-8 in Odoo, so you can use anything you want. The only thing you cannot use is a dot. Yeah.
You mentioned the dry run. So what does a dry run actually do? Just pass a file?
So no, there is no specific option to dry run. It's just you duplicate your production database that is already configured, and you duplicate it and you try on that database. So if you screwed up, it's fine. It's just a duplicate database. Yeah.
More of a comment or request.
Sorry? Yeah, those slides are.
In the say README of the.
Well, the import tool is more or less well documented. The transform framework is not yet well documented. I'm sorry. So you have this presentation is part of the presentation. There is also a test folder, which is well commented. In my example, so I have a specific repo for the example I show you. It's also documented on that repo. I think it's quite easy to understand. Sometimes mapper can be hard to understand since it's first order programming, so you have function as parameter of all the function. Sometimes it's a bit hard to understand, but once you get it, it's super straightforward to use it. No more question?